Perhaps one of my worst mistakes I made so confidently was moving me and my little sister Emily into our grandfather's old cabin in the woods. So we had nowhere else to go after I got laid off from my job. Times had been tough since Mom and Dad divorced. Me and Emily moved in with Mom. Unfortunately, she was quite the alcoholic. One night, she got a little carried away with her drinks. Ended up wrapping herself around a tree. We left with utter despair and hopelessness. Dad had no room for us to stay in his house, with his new family and all. That's when he offered for us to move into his father's old cabin. It wasn't too far from the main highway, conveniently enough. Our fresh move wasn't too difficult either. It was just me, Emily, and our family cat Whiskers. The three of us had some good times adjusting to our new home. Me and Emily still managed with the loss of Mom, but for the most part, we were coping. A few months passed, and aside from the occasional giant spider or snake, our new life was pretty calm. One day, that all changed. I began to notice Whiskers started to act strange around the cabin. There was times I caught him staring out the window, unmoving. This was not typical of his behavior. Most of the time I had to stop him from running rampant through the house, tearing up the furniture, tripping over cables. He was usually quite destructive, as expected from any orange cat, I suppose. He no longer ran, but rather walked around the house. Sometimes I found him hiding under the furniture, as if he was afraid of something. I would try to pull him out, and saying, "Psst, psst, psst, psst. Come here, Whiskers," only to be met with a low-toned growl and a hissing soon after. Whiskers was getting along in his years, and he was never hostile, quite the opposite in fact. And needless to say, this unsettled me. The cat I once knew and loved was seemingly gone. He was now replaced by this feral beast I hardly even recognized anymore. His new behavior only worsened as time went on. He stopped eating properly, until eventually he became all skin and bones. He looked more reminiscent of a Halloween decoration than an actual cat. This rattled me to my core. I decided I would get to the bottom of this. I would find out what happened to my cat. I decided to take him to the local vet. After an excruciating long wait in silence, the vet comes back to the waiting room just to inform us what we already knew, that he was malnourished. She said there was nothing they could do for him. We took Whiskers back home with looks of disappointment plastered on our faces. What was I missing? I whispered to myself as we entered our home. Don't stress yourself over it, John. Whiskers is getting old. He's not gonna act young forever, you know. No, Emily, you don't get it. Something just feels wrong here. What do you mean? She asked me. I don't know. I left her there in silence. We hardly spoke the next few days. This disturbance with Whiskers had shook both of us. For hours on end, I stayed in my room trying to figure out what the hell was going on. It was at this point things got really creepy. When I was leaving for work one day, I noticed something odd sticking out behind an old oak tree. It looked like an animal was laid out behind it. I slowly approached the object in question. What I saw took a hold of me by surprise. It was the corpse of a squirrel, or what was left of it. It had no form to it whatsoever. Its skin was still intact, yet cut open, almost perfectly, as if done by a professional. Inside you could still see its muscles and insides as clear as day. Except there was no bones. This was clearly not the work of an animal. No mere animal would be able to precisely remove the bones of a squirrel this size. No, this had to be the work of a human being, I thought to myself. I shivered at the thought of a deranged lunatic being outside our house in the darkness, shrouded by the forest. Since that incident, I've kept all the doors locked and windows closed, as well as all the blinds. Emily thought it was unnecessary, but unfortunately for us both, it was more than necessary. A few weeks later, Whiskers disappeared. Nowhere to be found. Not even a trace. We went into town, put up posters, but to no avail. We even tried calling the local animal shelters, but nobody had seen him. He was just gone. One night, out of sheer stupidity and desperation, I decided to go look for him out in the forest. "Where are you going, John? You can't go out there, it's not safe." "I will not sit here and wait for somebody to find Whisker's corpse." The thought of whatever psycho was out there mutilating my cat crept into the back of my mind. I quickly brushed it off, telling Emily, "Lock the doors, close the windows, and for God's sake, stay inside." Venturing into the pitch-black forest, I heard simple yet startling noises that made me jump and the hair on my neck stand up. I didn't want to leave Emily alone back there, but I also couldn't live with myself if something were to ever happen to her. I could hear the rustling of leaves and the crack of branches, just to realize it was usually just a rabbit or deer. At this point, even stumbling onto a pack of wolves would be more comforting than finding that crazed lunatic I believed to be stalking me. Delving deeper into the forest, I made sure to leave myself a trail to get back home, or so that I don't get lost. I started to smell the scent of burnt wood. If I didn't know any better, I would say somebody was barbecuing in what was essentially my backyard. Up ahead, there was 2 torches that lit the entrance to a cave. The cave was quite eroded and was loosely covered by moss and small plants. The entrance was littered with the skeletal remains of small animals. I knew this should have been my assignment to just go back home, but I needed to know if something happened to Whiskers. I reluctantly moved the plants and the spider-infested moss. then lifted the heavy wooden block off the entrance, serving as a makeshift door. Stepping inside, I gagged at the smell of what I could only assume to be rotting flesh. I was right, too. Further into the cave, lit up by torches, hung neatly on the walls. I could see old rotten corpses hanging by half-broken strings. Things only got weirder the deeper I went into the cave. Skulls and bones that covered the floor of the cave appeared to be missing chunks. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I never would have believed what I'm going to tell you next. The bones seemed to have been bitten and chewed on. What's worse is, I could have sworn some of the remains appeared to be human. No, that can't be right, I quietly said to myself. My fears were confirmed when I almost tripped over a skull with a golden tooth in it. This was now undoubtedly my most traumatizing experience I ever had. Something told me if I kept going, things would only get worse. Once again, I was right. I started to hear a distant crunch sound coming from a distant corner of the cave. The closer I got, the easier it became to make out. Also, the sound of chewing. My gut wrenched at the thought of the sight of a cannibal feasting on another human. There around the corner, I saw it. A creature that faintly resembled a human. It had pale white skin, a bony spine that seemed to nearly protrude through its skin. And when it snapped its neck towards me, I got a glance at its shrunken eye sockets. Its crimson red eyes cut right through the eerie darkness and seemed to stare directly into my soul. My heartbeat bellowed through my eardrums as I quickly hid back, out of sight. I then noticed a bright, glaring reflection out the corner of my eye. It was a pet collar. I was just enough in reach of it as to not disturb the creature further. I reached out and quickly grabbed it. It was attached to the skeletal remains of a cat. My heart dropped down to my gullet as I read the name. Whiskers. I began to quietly sob to myself. This thing had taken and eaten my cat, left only his bones. Or so I thought. That's when it hit me. All the bodies hanging up, the bones removed, no signs of carved meat left out or cooked. This thing didn't want to eat everyone. It wanted their bones. I decided it was time to leave. That's when the creature spoke to me. Bones. Bring more bones. I started to sweat all over. My adrenaline was pumping. I ran as fast as humanly possible, tripping over bones on the whole way out. Tears wept out of fear and sadness started to run down my face as I ran. I ran all the way home, banging on the door. Emily! Let me in! Damn near tearing the door apart with my insistent banging. Finally, she swung open the door and I bursted in without hesitation. He got him, Emily! I sobbed. Who got him? That thing, Emily! Whoa, 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 John. Slow down, you're not making any sense. I handed her the bloody collar of our beloved Whiskers as she began to burst into tears. sorry, Emily. There was this creature. What creature? She asked as her sobbing caused her words to get caught in her throat. Look, I don't have time to explain. We need to leave now. Okay, Emily replied. We grabbed all we could and darted out of the house as fast as we could. I explained to Dad what happened, and he allowed us to stay with him until we got back on our feet. A few months passed, and we managed to find our own place in town. Life got to normal for a while. Then I returned from work one day. Emily was missing. 2 weeks later, they found her body out in the woods. All of her bones removed. The only thing that distinguished her was the collar of whiskers she kept in her pocketbook this whole time. I've lost everything I cared about. I'm making this message in hopes that you'll heed my advice, which is this. If you cared about your life or your loved ones, please stay out of the woods. If you find half-eaten bones, God help you.